So I was suddenly having dinner with a table of people from different continents. And honestly, that made me felt alive again. So it was something that made me really passionate. So I know it's a personal aim because not everyone wants to know the world, but I feel if I'm going to live this life, I would like actually to know as much as I could of where the place we live.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 53 of the Emigrants Life podcast, where we share stories of people who left their country to chase a better life. And through these stories, you can find ideas, resources, and motivation to do the same. I'm Leonardo Biasi, and in this episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Isabel. Isabel is originally from Uruguay and moved to Ireland when she was 28. Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life? Doing what everybody else is doing? What society expects you to do? That's exactly what Isabel experienced back in her own country. She felt like she was going through a checklist that someone else made for her. After going through a very hard time in her life, Isabel decided to make a complete 180-degree change. She decided to move abroad to continue her study and experience other cultures and what the world has to offer. Isabel applied for a scholarship in a university in Ireland, but things didn't go as planned. In fact, she didn't get the scholarship. But that didn't stop her from chasing her dream. She found another way to move and studying overseas. Even though her plan was to spend only 1 year abroad, she ended up loving Ireland so much that she decided to stay longer and make it her new home. In this episode, we will talk about scholarship, how to apply for one, and the things to know if you're planning to go and studying abroad. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Isabel. Hi Isabel, thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, no worries. So, Isabel, you are originally from Uruguay and now you live in Ireland. But I'd like to start from the very beginning. So, what was your life back in Uruguay and why did you decide to live?
Yeah, that's exactly. I'm in Ireland at the moment. I live in Dublin and I'm originally from Uruguay, actually from a small city in the countryside. But the last 10 years I live in the capital, so in Montevideo. So that's probably a short question with a very long answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I came here when I was 28, but to start actually the story, when I was 25, I had the chance to travel around Asia and Europe for about 6 months with a trip that was organized by my college. And this trip was a great experience, probably the most amazing experience of my life. And even if I always loved traveling, in that trip, probably for the same first time, I took conscious of how passionate I was about diversity and knowing different cultures. So I truly enjoyed every second of those 6 months. But immediately coming back from that trip, from that experience, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And 3 months after she died. So suddenly, my life kind of changed and I stepped into what was probably the hardest and the darkest period of my life until now. And even if it's something I wouldn't clearly not desire, I'm actually grateful about how much that pain taught me because it kind of made me close to life. So I kind of start challenging my life in all areas. I start asking myself, if my life also ended 3 months, what would I do? And I start feeling that my life at the moment was kind of a checklist of what I was told to do and what I had to do or what I was telling myself I had to do to be happy or what actually from society that I needed to be happy.
Kind of like an expectation from other people?
Yes, exactly. And from myself and from others, from myself, from what I was told, from what I decided to believe. So I studied for years. I got my degree. I got a good job in a multinational company. And at some point with my couple, we were starting to talk about buying a house and having kids. And I kind of start feeling I was following a checklist. And there was nothing in that checklist that was really myself, or I felt there was no footprint of myself in my life. it was kind of a checklist and I was doing the same as everyone else. So I started craving for adding kind of my personal touch to my own life. And the idea of studying abroad was in my head since I was little, actually. I always loved languages and I always dreamed with being able to study abroad and knowing other cultures. And I was craving that multicultural environment in my country. And I guess after being 6 months abroad, I also started to notice that I couldn't find that much of different cultures in my own country. So after breaking up with my ex, the idea started to take more and more power. Remember, actually, I was holidays in Brazil. I was lying on the beach and reading The Alchemist and thinking like it's a book around dreams and how to be brave for going for them. And I just started thinking why I was not brave enough to actually follow what I wanted and follow my dreams. Why I was holding myself back. So the dream kind of started to gain more power and I started to battling all the fears around. So you might resonate with this, but there is a lot of fear of failing, a lot of guilt of leaving your family behind, especially in my case after those hard years we had. Mm-hmm. So it was a really hard decision and still a decision I'm really grateful about.
Oh yeah, I totally resonate with what you just said from losing your mom, which is, I don't know if you heard the episode I did a couple of weeks ago. I share the same kind of similar situation where I lost my dad, and that put everything in perspective. Like the fact that you only have one life and now you see it's fragile, because since at that point for me it seems like things like that, like losing your parent, is something that doesn't happen to you. It usually happens to other people, but not to yourself. And when it actually happen to you, you start realizing how life is fragile and how precious life is, and put everything in perspective. So
yes, exactly.
I can totally resonate with you. So what was talk about your dream? You say you were laying on the beach trying to realize that you were not living the life you wanted to live. What was your dream at that point? What was what did you want to achieve in that moment in life?
Yeah, so I kind of realized I needed more diversity in my life. I'm a very curious person and I love learning about other cultures. And I think it's a great exercise. It makes you challenge your own ideas. So I kind of like challenging my own ideas and what I thought it was true a couple of years ago. I might not think it now. So I was kind of craving being surrounded by different kind of people and maybe having more chance of doing my own checklists instead of following the one I was following.
And what was your checklist? I mean, I guess going abroad and trying different experience, trying to have experience with other culture, what was it kind of on your checklist?
I kind of actually detached from having a checklist because when I came here, my plan was to stay 1 year and see what happens. And I kind of start to embrace the idea of not knowing what happens. Because as you mentioned before, when you lose somebody you really love and everything gets into perspective. And as you were saying, you realize how fragile life is and how it can change and how you cannot control what is happening. Mm-hmm. So I kind of changed a bit my mindset from actually having a plan to embrace uncertainty. And it's not that I don't have goals. Of course, I have them, but I think I gain flexibility and also embrace whatever is coming that you might not expect. Sometimes life surprises you for good, for bad, but sometimes you end in a different place of what you were planning. I was definitely not planning to live abroad. If you ask me, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I wouldn't even guess this would be my life now. So I kind of start embracing that and being more flexible and try not to actually have a checklist.
Makes sense. So when you left Uruguay, your idea was just to go abroad for a little bit and travel, experience a new culture and all of that, and then go back to Uruguay?
Yes, exactly. I actually arranged with my previous employer to come back after 1 year. So at the beginning, the idea was going for 1 year and and just have the experience of going abroad. And then when I was here, the idea started to change. I actually realized how much I was craving for that different environment and how much it changed me as well to be abroad. So then I decided to stay for longer, but again, trying not to have rigorous plan and go a bit more with the flow and with what I want in the moment. So
Okay, so sounds like you were kind of like a surprise, like how life was actually, you prefer the life abroad in another country. So you decide to stay there a little bit longer. So, but sounds like that because for most people, and I know we discussed this before we do the interview, that you have like a European passport, right?
yes, exactly. So my mom was Spanish, so I was lucky to actually have a Spanish passport and I had the chance to stay. But I think also if you study a master here, you will have a study visa, and Ireland actually give you the chance to apply for a 2 years extension if you find a job immediately after your master. Even if I was not Spanish, I could have go for that option too. I had some friends from abroad that had used that option.
No, because that's where I kind of was going to. Like when you don't have a passport, you have on a visa, you kind of, even though if you don't want to make plans, but at the same time, you kind of need to have plans just because if you want to stay in the country, you need to move ahead of the time. So if you want to decide to stay in the country, you can't decide the month before your visa expires. You need to be ahead, like 6 months ahead and decide it 6 months before your visa runs out. Like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to stay? Should I try to stay and find a way to stay? Should I go somewhere else? Should I go back to my country? But at least you have that option, the flexibility that you had European passport. So you didn't have to make the decision like 6 months in advance. Okay, if this works out, I can stay. If not, I can go back to Uruguay or I can go somewhere else in Europe because other countries speak English in Europe. So you kind of have, at least you were lucky at the kind of flexibility that you could move and have probably less plans.
Yes, that's true. That's definitely true.
And going back to the fact when you left your country, you say it was like pretty challenging, which is even then, I totally get it. You even like mentioned that fear to failure. Was that something that you wanted to prove to your friends or to family or maybe somebody else?
Not really, but I think when you are starting to have the idea of going abroad, a lot of fears come, and the failure is like, oh, if I go, for example, I was going to study. So, oh, if I actually fail my master, or if I actually am not managed to actually have classes of finance in English, or my English is not good, or I don't find a job afterwards, like, so a lot of fears, or I'm not able to actually maintain myself economically, financially. A lot of fears arrive from that situation when you are starting to think of studying or living abroad.
Oh yeah, no, totally get it. Because for me, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's the same for you, but for me it was like the fear of not knowing what's going to happen more than failure. For me, was like I'm not going to fail. It's just like, I don't know if I can make it. I don't know what to expect because I've never done it before. So I don't know
exactly
what's going to be. It's more like the fear of the unknown more than failure because you don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Yes, exactly. And if you will be able to manage it if whatever happens.
So you decided to move to Ireland, and the way you decided to move to Ireland was through school. What was the process? Because you mentioned before the interview that you tried to apply for scholarship, but that didn't go like your way. So how did you find a school to move to Ireland?
Yeah, so I initially want to study in the UK, as one of my aims was also to improve my English. And in that trip I mentioned before, I went actually into the UK and I absolutely love it. So I applied to a program that is called Chevening. I will actually share with you the link because they have scholarships for a lot of countries, and there are scholarships for studying a master in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So they select some areas that your country wants to improve, and then they give a number of scholarships for that. So I will share with you the link because they are actually open at the moment. They open in August and you can apply until November.
Oh, sweet.
So that's what I did in that moment. And it didn't work. It didn't work out for me. I actually applied the year that the UK decided to go for the Brexit. So they cut down the number of scholarships. So my chances got reduced. They just select smaller number than the normal years. So it didn't work out, but during that process, I had to collect a lot of information. I had to write assignments about my motivation to go abroad. I had to write assignments about my leadership skills and how I want to develop them. And I had to take an English exam. And I also had to select and apply for 3 universities in the UK. So after doing all that, I was rejected. I was actually depressed, but talking to a friend, she mentioned that year she was in Ireland, and she actually suggests, why you don't look in Trinity? It's such a nice college and such well known. And I said, like, okay, I might look. Then I look into Trinity, and they had this master that was what I wanted to study. So it was applying, it was applicable to what I wanted. That was a master in finance. And it was like something I could afford. So I sent all the information I prepared for the Chevening to Trinity, and I got approved and selected after a couple of days. So even though the whole process of the scholarships didn't work out, I think I still got all the knowledge from preparing all that information, because for preparing those assignments, I actually checked with different people. I checked with different friends and teachers for the English. I checked with different people that my motivation was good, was understandable. So I did a lot of work on those assignments that afterwards it was really easy to prepare an application for Trinity.
Yeah, because like the application for scholarship can be like a pretty time consuming. So why were you rejected?
I have no clue. Probably I was not, but they were looking. And in the case of Chevening, it's for priority areas in your country. So I chose renewable energies, which was a priority area for Uruguay, but still could be that finance was not priority area of expertise, as if they might prefer to give the scholarship to engineers. So that's my guess. I don't really know.
Okay, they don't tell you why.
No, they don't give you any feedback around that. But what I know is that all the information and all the time I spent on that, I kind of use it afterwards for prepare a quick application to another place. So it was worth doing anyway.
Okay, so your plan kind of went through, but at the same time it was like a kind of slightly different. I mean, if you get a scholarship, it's a big like a financial difference. It makes a big difference like financially. So now you have to another country, and now you have to pay for your master, which is usually not cheap when you're studying abroad. So probably it changed. It was like maybe like a big difference for you when you're planning to move abroad. But at the same time, what you said before was actually nice, that you had the safety net, the fact that after a year you can always go back and still have your job, which is a huge like a safety net. If something goes wrong, you come back, you still have, carry on pretty much your life. You have already a job. You don't have to be too worried about what if things don't go the way I plan it, right?
Yes, exactly. So when I got rejected, I kind of had to start a plan B. As you were saying, it was not my initial plan to actually use my savings for that. And I would definitely have preferred to have a sponsorship and help on that instead of using my savings. But I talked in my shop, and I arranged that they could give me my shop back, which, as you were saying, got me some safety back, because I was spending savings, but at the same time, if I wanted, I could come back to my shop and save again in some way. So I kind of built a plan B after that rejection. And the positive side was that the Chevening scholarships actually require you to come back to your country after you end the master. And I had the chance to stay because, as you were saying, I had the European passport. But even if I got a student visa, I would have this chance to stay for 2 years more. So at least in that way, I actually gained the chance to stay if I wanted, and gain that flexibility as well.
What made you change? What made you decide to stay longer in Ireland?
So I think I felt really comfortable on that year. And it was not my initial idea. As I told you before, I came with the idea of staying for 1 year and even arranged with my employer to come back. But I felt really alive from the first day arriving here. Not only I love the place, I love the people. Irish people is lovely. And the Irish culture itself is really nice and they have an amazing history. But more than that was the chance of living in a country where there are more than 200 nationalities. So I was suddenly having dinner with a table of people from different continents. And honestly, that made me felt alive again. So it was something that made me really passionate. I know this is not for everyone and we are all different and we are all attracted to different things. But the personal thing is that I always wanted to know the world. And so it's even traveling or even getting to know other people that live in other places. I think those are the ways that you get that knowledge. So I know it's a personal aim because not everyone wants to know the world, but I feel if I'm going to live this life, I would like actually to know as much as I could of where the place we live.
Yeah, I remember having a similar feeling when I landed in New Zealand. I was staying in a hostel. So there were like people from all over the world. And like I was sitting at the table with people from South Africa, people from the US, people from Asia, somewhere. Even though I didn't really understand what they were saying because I didn't speak the language at that point. But just the fact that like I was sitting on the table and everybody were talking on using the same universal language, which is English, is for me was like mind blowing, like so cool. I remember like being in that situation. I still like I have this like a visual picture in my head, like sitting on the table with other people. It was like so cool. I was like definitely. It was like I loved it. It was just making worth it. The decision I made it was great. So I totally get what you're saying.
Exactly. And as you said before, I think it also gives you perspective, like knowing other realities give you a lot of perspective and makes you more grateful in the things that your country might be better or your culture might be better, and also learning in the other things that other cultures might be better. So it makes you like, I think it definitely makes you a better person.
Oh, totally.
A better version of yourself.
Did it give you even the sense of freedom that you could be anything you want? Now you are starting fresh in a new country. Now you can decide what you want to do, maybe even change your career or become a different person or start things that you ever thought about it, but you never done it. You kind of feel like this freedom of doing whatever you want.
Yes, exactly. I think that's probably the upside of being an immigrant, that you don't have all the society background on your shoulders and you detach a bit of all the things you had to be because you are indeed free and you are in this multicultural environment. But there are less rules, I guess, or something like that. Less pressure.
Probably you hang out with people, you surround yourself with people that are doing the same thing that you're doing. So maybe you get inspired by what other people have done or maybe what other people, which country they travel to, and you get inspired by these people. And it's like, oh, I want to do that. And if they can do it, I can probably do the same thing, right?
Yes, exactly. When you're an immigrant, you end hanging out with a lot of people that's coming from abroad as well. So you end having this multicultural surrounding that's changed all the time because I think as well your friends will change every year or every 2 years. But yeah, you receive the knowledge of different people from different countries and different lives. So you start to have other options, not the typical options you have in your head, but other options from other lives. And yeah, I think it's great. It makes you more flexible and more open-minded.
And going back to like studying abroad and doing your master in Ireland, what were the requirements or what usually are the requirements to get into either a scholarship program or to be accepted in a school abroad?
Yeah, okay. So for the scholarship, I actually took them today just to remind myself what were. So for the Chevening scholarship, you needed to be a citizen of the Chevening eligible countries. So there is a list and you just need to check that your country is there. You need to return to your country for a minimum of 2 years after your award is ended. You need to have complete an undergraduate degree that will enable you to get entry to a postgrad program at the UK. and you needed to have at least 2 years of work experience. And the last requirement was that you need to apply to 3 universities and get at least one offer from them by a certain date. So they give you a lot of time actually, because now it's by July 2022. So those were the requirements for the Chevening program. Then for applying for normal college, you definitely need an undergraduate degree that allows you to go for a master or a postgrad program. They will take your scholarship, so you need to have a good scholarship, but that's depending on your university, I think. So you can get ranking of your scholarship in your own university. That's how I did it, at least. And then you need to prepare like a motivation letter, saying why you would want to apply and how would the college benefit of you being a student there. So for all that application, it was really helpful to have the documents I actually prepared for the Chevening program. It was really useful and really handy, and I could use everything for the second application. And they will ask you as well to have a certain level of English. So you need to take an international English exam. There are several options. The one I took, it was IELTS, and they ask you for a 7 out of 9 level. So that's kind of what I remember were the requirements.
So 7 out of, what did you say? 7 out of 9, right?
Yeah.
The result needs to be.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at my score when I did it for my visa here. Overall, I think it was 6.5 my English level. So 7 is, you need to be able to like speak and understand English in a pretty much a good level of English.
It's a different exam. So IELTS will have 2 different exams. One is the one you use for the visas, and the other one is the one for academic.
Oh, yes, you're right.
So you have 2 different, more or less probably the level might be the same, but the format changed a bit. So they might ask you a bit more formal documents. I think it was a kind of different, the writing part.
So I guess even to one of the requirements, I guess, to get a scholarship or to be accepted in a university or in a school abroad, you kind of need to be a good student and prove that you have good grades and all of that, I guess, right?
Yes, exactly. So prove that you were a good student, or I think good level student, and prove that you have enough English level. You can definitely prepare those exams. There are loads of information online to prepare. You might have used it to prepare for the visa as well. So there's loads online, and the same for Chevening. There is loads of information on how to prepare the applications, and there is loads of Facebook groups that you gather more information and get in contact with people that is on the same process.
Yeah. Actually, I'm doing an interview with 2 guys actually I met through the podcast. They are doing pretty much exactly the same. They do like a courses to prepare you to do the IELTS. So I got like, there's going to be an episode in the next coming weeks or months about that specifically. So yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, because I remember when I was taking the test, it was like so stressful because I could speak the language. I was able to understand. I was able to work. So my English was good enough to live in a country and be able to work and all of that. But when you do the IELTS, or probably other tests as well, they do things that you not normally do, like writing or like writing an essay. Like, I don't know how to write. Like they ask you to write 4,000 words or something like that in a limited time and coming up with a topic. Like absolutely something that I didn't know what to do, but not just in English, just even Italian, I couldn't do that. I even met people that like an English speaker that have trouble like getting a good score in the IELTS because just you're being tested not really like on the things that you on the English level that you usually normally use in life, but more like an academic kind of thing, like writing an essay and all of that.
Exactly, and with time restrictions as well. I remember I was really great on the reading part, but when I had the time to do it, if I put the time of the IELTS, then my score went down. So yeah, like even if you would understand it and reply correctly, if you have half an hour more, they will require to go certain times. So you need to actually practice your being quick as well.
So you land in Ireland, you study in the school, like your English level you have to prove, so was good enough, was pretty good to go to school. But what was your experience when you actually start taking classes in a different language?
The first semester is harder. Yeah. So the first semester, like Irish people will also have a strong accent. So the first semester, it was actually hard to get everything. I was studying finance and I didn't study finance for a while as well back home. So yeah, it was really challenging to get back to studying, to get back to academic studying, and to also have to deal with a different language and different accents. We will have teachers from a lot of places, but mostly the Irish accent was the challenging for me.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
So it was really challenging, but I think it's the first 5-6 months. When I started the second semester, I realized one day I was not struggling anymore and I could take notes of class more easily and I could do the assignments more easily. So I think you are like a little sponge and you're getting knowledge and getting knowledge and getting knowledge. And even if you don't realize, at some point you start to think in English, which everybody tells you, but at the beginning it's not. At the beginning I was translating in my head. I was thinking Spanish and translating to English. But at some point after a few months, I start to actually think in English and I start realizing that it was not as challenging anymore. So it's just a learning curve. It's like when you're very little and you start talking, it's the same. Like you would be like 1 year, 1.5 years that you don't talk, but you are actually absorbing knowledge from everywhere. And at some point you start talking and talking and talking and the words come out. And it was kind of the same at some moment. Like I just start to be fluent and I just start not to struggle anymore. But it was challenging at the beginning, even if I study English from very little actually.
Yeah, but it's different. As you say, even the pronunciation, the accent, the Irish accent is not the easiest accent to start with.
Yes, and being fluent while talking is actually challenging. One thing is to write and one thing is to read, but other thing is actually to be talking and thinking in another language.
Yeah, exactly. Even like being in school for like that long, like for hours, like listening in English and getting like a new information in English must be exhausting. When I was start learning English and having conversation with people, just listening to people is exhausting.
Yes, it takes a lot of energy, even if you don't realize you are exhausted at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. And it was actually funny that they said that you mastered the language, or you mastered the language when you start dreaming in that language.
Yes.
So when you start like dreaming in English. And for me, it's even like it takes like an extra step when you start swearing. Or like it was something like, when you say, for me, like it's when I drive. I know you don't drive, but when I drive and somebody like cut you off and you immediately say something like you swear, if that swear comes out in English, that means
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Like
that's when you realize. Yeah, the same for me when I do something and I just curse in English, I'm like, oh, okay, I think in English now.
Yeah, that's extreme level. There's dreaming and then swearing.
Yeah, that's the extreme. But the only way actually is just to get surrounded by the language. I remember my English teacher who told me, like, start listening the radio in the UK, read a book you are interested in English. So I actually start reading like thrillers or things like that I was so into the book that I didn't even realize it was English anymore. So yeah, start to make yourself surrounded like you would do when you're a baby, you will be surrounded by the language and then start talking. So start to put everything that you can in English and watch Netflix in English, things like that, little things that start to go into your brain, even if you're not realizing it. And one day you start to actually notice you don't struggle anymore.
No, exactly. One thing I like to say for the listeners that are planning to move abroad, that want to learn the language, you can be prepared. Like, I changed the language on my phone months before I left Italy. I just changed it to English. And when I moved to New Zealand, I stopped reading Italian, listening to songs in Italian. Everything I was consuming was in English. The people I was hanging out with, English speaker, I was trying to avoid. I avoided Italians for years just because otherwise you ended up speaking your own language. So as you said, immerse yourself with the language in any aspect of your life. Just maybe after a few years, you go back and start reading books in your own language, because sometimes it's probably better to give you better emotions when you're reading your own language than actually the second language. But at least for the first few years until you master the language, just trying to read and consume everything in the language you're trying to learn and master. That's my advice.
Yes, exactly. That's true. I also changed the settings in my phone.
Yeah. And do you have regrets about leaving your country?
Not really, not really. Of course, I miss my country, and of course, I miss especially my family. I'm really a family person, and my close friends. So I lived there for 28 years, so I have really close friends. And I try to go at least once a year. I have been lucky enough to actually be able to do that. But I don't really regret leaving it because it was something I really want to do. And I think when you actually pursue what you want and like your passions and your dreams, you end being a better daughter, a better friend, a better sister. So I try to ensure I have quality time with them because I won't be able to have quantity. But at least when I go, try to have those quality moments. But I don't really regret. I think it was what I wanted. And that's why, like, when I arrived here, I actually felt it, that it was what I wanted.
It's actually about quality time that you said. I spoke with a guy like a while ago. It was actually an Irish guy that moved here in Canada. And he was like sharing this experience when he went back to Ireland, and he was talking with his dad. And he was talking about like, I don't remember exactly, but he was mentioning something that he was counting like how many times goes every year. So it's like if you go there back to your own country every year or every 2 years or whatever, and maybe your dad is like a 60 years old, like how many times you actually go back, how many times you actually gonna see your dad or your family members, whatever. Like let's put everything in perspective. Because I don't know if it's 60, for example, let's put like it will live like hopefully until 80 or something like that. You go back every 2 years, that means you're gonna see your dad 10 more times, right? That put everything in perspective about the quality time versus quantity.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's not for everyone, as we said before. I think not everyone wants to live abroad. Not everyone would enjoy it. But I feel if you really want, if it's something you want, you will definitely miss your country because let's not lie, I miss a lot my country. But at the end of the day, you will be happy with your decisions because you went for what you wanted and you want for your personal footprint to your life. So yes, then you can actually try to ensure that you have more quality moments. And as you were saying, if you count the amount of times that you see your family in a normal life, it's not that much difference. If you go once a year, it's more, I think, the sensation because you know they are far and you cannot go. So that's a challenge when you're far away. You have to deal with that you cannot go immediately if you wanted, and if it's something happened, it has to be something really bad for you to actually take a flight and take the time off. But I think, as I was saying, like when you are happier and you go for what you want, at the end of the day, you end being a better daughter and a better sister rather than the person that stayed knowing that they wanted to go for other things,
Yeah. About living abroad, what was the biggest upside about emigrating, about living abroad?
I think in the case of my country, it's definitely the multicultural environment. So I come from a little country. We are almost all European descendants. So you wouldn't have different multicultures. You wouldn't even have too many different religions and too many different races. So I think in my case, best side of living abroad was definitely to be able to connect with different cultures that I wouldn't be able back home. And also living in Europe, yeah, it's really easy to travel. So very passionate about traveling. So it was something positive about it as well, that I could travel everywhere like really easily. It's a bit more harder in South America to travel around. So those things were probably the upsides from living abroad.
And is there anything that you wouldn't done differently?
I don't think so. If I go in time, I think I would say to myself just to enjoy each part of the process. So I studied life coaching on the last years, and now I actually work with people that are planning to do a transition from one country to the other one. And I always tell them to try to that, to enjoy each part of the transition, because there is the first period where it's only a dream and it's only in your mind, and you feel there is no progress because you're thinking a lot, because you come and go with the idea and there's things holding you back, and there is you cannot see external changes. But at that moment, you're actually building strong foundations. You're gaining clarity in what you really want. So that's the only thing I think if I could back in time, I would tell myself just to enjoy each part and give yourself the time and the space to dream without limits, so you can know what you really want and leave the how for a later stage. First, be clear on what is that you're passionate about and what are your dreams. And when you're struggling and fighting with all that fears, that I know it comes a lot of anxiety. And as we were saying, it comes like thinking, would I ever be able to? Would I ever be able to pay for my studies, to find a job? Or even as we say, like, would I have enough knowledge of the language, or will I struggle? But I think, I don't know if this is your situation as well, but when I go back, I actually remember those first days that I have the idea with so much gratitude, because that's where the journey starts. Not like the day you arrive to the country, but the day the idea starts in your mind and you start actually dreaming about it in some way.
Yeah. And now, like, you went through all these challenges and you overcome the fact that, now you overcome, and now you know the unknown that was there before. Now you know exactly what that is, and you managed to overcome that. You managed to succeed all of these challenges, all of these things that you thought were unknown at the time. And after all of that, you feel lucky. Do you feel lucky to be an immigrant, or was it worth it to make the change?
Yes, definitely. I feel like, I also feel lucky to be in a country that is really open to immigrants, and it might not be the case in any country. But yes, I definitely feel lucky of having the chance to choose where I want to live. And I know that's not always the situation for everybody. So I feel really lucky to be an immigrant here.
Sweet. And do you have any other particular advice you like to give to the listener that either wants to move to Ireland or they're trying to studying abroad?
I think what we just discussed, I would say living abroad, like as I mentioned before, is not for everybody. Even traveling is not for everybody. Not everybody likes it. And I think that's fine, that we are all different and we have all different things that we are passionate about and that we want to get in life. But I think if somebody's listening this and they have that little voice in their head telling, what if I move abroad? What if I study abroad? I think you should go for it. You should connect with that feeling. As I was saying, gain clarity in what you really want. Allow yourself to dream without thinking in how you will do it. And this can be done in different ways. In my experience, it was through coaching, as I was mentioning. It was through meditation, through yoga, that I could actually connect with what I really wanted. And then once you identified, just spend time gaining awareness of what is holding you back and challenge why I wouldn't be able to handle language, or why I wouldn't be able to handle a master, or why I wouldn't be able to find a job. And you don't have to move abroad. You can travel, you can study for a while. There are hundreds of options now. But I think if you have like the little voice, I would say like listen to it and go for it.
Yeah, let's give it a try, and then you can decide if it's for something for you or not, right?
Yeah, exactly. As we did, we gave it a try, and then we decided it was something we wanted for the future. But you never know. You might change. You might go and see like, oh, certain time is enough for me. 6 months, 1 year, that's enough for me. I want to come back. And that's fair as well. But yes, if you have the internal question, I would say like, try it.
No, exactly. Even because if maybe you move abroad and it's something that is not for you, but put in perspective, because maybe then you think like, oh no, I really miss my family. And maybe you go back to your country and you spend more time. You're not taking your family, your friends for granted anymore, because you miss them for that period of time when you were abroad. And you know now that that's a big part of your life. That's a big part of what you want in life. So you give that more importance than other stuff, right? So it's always a win for me.
Exactly. It gives you perspective, as we said before.
Exactly. And you mentioned like a coaching before. Do you want to tell the listeners how do you try to help other people through coaching?
Yes, sure. So I started studying coaching a few years ago, and now I actually help people and work with people towards transitions. I also focus on self-love, but I like a lot to do work when, as we were saying, when somebody is trying to move from a country to the other one, or sometimes it's even before when they want to change and they don't know even what to change. So sometimes they are in an earlier stage or a stage where they are needing a change, a craving for something, but it's hard for them to I actually identify what is that something. So there is a lot of exercise and tools you can do through coaching to actually gain clarity of what do you really want, then start challenging all that limitations that you could have and limiting beliefs, we call them in coaching, that are holding you back. As we were saying, ideas like, oh, I won't be able to speak other language, or I won't be able to do a master abroad, or I won't have enough money to survive abroad, or all the fears that actually could come with that idea. So you can do work around that in coach. In my experience, it works really well because you gain that clarity and then you start thinking in other options that you might not consider at the beginning. So as it happened with me as well, like I was aiming for a scholarship, but I end actually going for a master. And instead of going abroad 1 year, I actually stay working here. So might be different options you're not even considering at the beginning. And the tools that coaching applies gives you the chance to take other perspective over the same problem.
Sweet. And if people wants to get in touch with you, maybe wants to do like a coaching session with you, or just maybe have a question for you because they resonate with your story and want to ask you something more, where people can find you?
Yes, sure. So they can find me in Instagram. So a few months, I actually create this little space in Instagram where I share tools, coaching, yoga or meditation as well. Because as I mentioned before, there were tools that actually helped me so much during this transition process. So I started to share in them and they can find me. My Instagram is Journey with Isa. And they can also email me, and the email is hello@journeywithisa.com. So feel free to contact if you have any question, if you want any advice, if you want, or just to say hi.
That's nice as well.
Yeah, it's always nice.
Sweet. For the listeners, that they can find all the links, everything we discussed, and even the links to get in touch with you, everything as usual will be in the show notes. So thank you so much, Isabel, to share your story. And I really enjoyed it, especially because probably I resonate a lot with what you said at the beginning, with the way you left your country, the reason why you decided to leave your country. So I definitely resonate a lot with that, and I really enjoy listening to it. So thank you so much for sharing your story here on the podcast. You're
very welcome, Daniel, and thanks for having me here. It was great to actually talk with you.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Isabel.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week and stick until the end. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Isabel and found some valuable information to use in your own journey of emigrating. If you did enjoy this episode, do me a favor, please share it with your friends or someone you know who's planning to move abroad. And as I mentioned before, you can find links and everything we talk about in this episode in the show notes by visiting emigrantlife.com/episode 53. You can also find the link for the show notes in the description below. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter @emigrants_life and Facebook @emigrants_life podcast. And one more thing, if you're planning to move to a new country and you need help, feel free to reach out to me either via email at daniel@emigrantlife.com or through our website emigrantlife.com. I know that making the jump is not always easy. It definitely wasn't easy for me. But with the right plan and the right resources, everything becomes possible and less scary. After all, helping you moving abroad is our goal, so don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you in the next one. Ciao!